Hello, everybody. Welcome to Let's Talk Football. My name is John Halpin alongside Chris Palmer. Chris Palmer, how you doing today?
Draft is over. Very exciting week. How you doing?
I'm great, man. Hey, it is now May. We are officially recording in the month of May. The weather's starting to get really nice, and hey, football season's right around the corner, just a couple months away.
Both of us diehard nerds. It's all around all year round.
Uh, all year round, baby. And so we wanted to make this episode as part of our NFL draft recap. So last week was the NFL draft, which for those of you who don't know, is where college players are selected to various teams and join the NFL. So it's recruiting college players into the league. So it's like, handpicking them. And it's a 3-day event, Thursday to Friday, Thursday to Saturday, 7 rounds. Uh, Very time consuming, but I know this took place in Detroit, Michigan, so I know a lot of Lions fans were probably very happy about just having some football in the month of April. But with that being said, Chris Palmer, are you ready to talk some NFL draft?
That whole weekend was fun. I think they actually broke a record for the highest public viewing of the NFL draft with over 70,000 people in attendance or something on night
Ooh.
one. I believe it was something along those lines between 70 and 100,000 people the first
Mhm.
night for the first round, which is absolutely insane. So the people of Detroit are absolutely loyal to the NFL. The football community is great in Detroit.
And I will just say this, I think it's just kind of funny too that's like again, nearly 100,000 people are outside Detroit to watch a man in a suit go up to a podium and say college
Just to
players'
boo
names,
him.
just like, just to say
Just to
college
boo
players'
him.
names, and then take like 20-minute intervals between the texts. I'm like,
Right. And they pay
diehards, man.
dumb money.
They paid money for that. Oh God,
You gotta pay for those tickets.
fuck that.
You gotta pay for those tickets, fam. Those aren't just you walk up and see it. That's a paid
oh,
ticket. That's a paid
oh,
event.
oh, fuck that.
That's
I'd
not a
rather
free festival.
Oh man, I'd rather do like I'd rather watch it on TV, but oh my god,
What, you
holy
think the
shit!
NFL is a non-for-profit organization?
I mean, shit, man, it's a $1 billion enterprise right here. Oh
Shit.
shit, damn, they wish. But anyway, let's. So, as I said before, the draft is divided into rounds, and it's 1 through 7. And Thursday night was exclusively the first round. So basically, teams had their first pick at college players. So let's talk a little bit about the first round of the NFL draft because that's typically when you see a lot of the best college players go to teams. So Chris Palmer, I'll hand the torch off to you. Tell me your thoughts on the first round of the NFL draft.
First off, when it comes to the first round of the NFL, or first round in professional sports in general, but when it comes to the first 32 taken off the board, those are best, the 32 best football players in the world coming from college. Those are the best players in the nation at what they do. So the talent level from 1 to 32 are top tier throughout the entire NCAA. So there is a statistic, there is a 2% chance that you will be drafted into the NFL as a college player. Almost impossible that you're going to get drafted at all, let alone be thrown into the top 32. So hats off to every single person who got drafted in the NFL draft in those 7 rounds. But to the first 32, you are the best. Now it's time for you to show that you are the best. Um, for the first round, there was really only one surprise that I think everyone agrees upon was the Atlanta Falcons drafting a quarterback in the first round. I think that was really the only one that was like a head turning question mark
Mm-hmm.
as to why they would draft after going so heavy on Kirk Cousins in the offseason.
Yeah, that was a big head scratcher too because Atlanta has a lot of defensive needs because last year they were one of two teams that had like the worst defensive pass rush percentage. Um and to draft Michael Penix out of, I believe, Washington, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
He that was weird because you paid a month ago. We talked about how Kirk Cousins went to Atlanta for a 4-year deal, $180 million. You're paying him all this money, and then you draft a quarterback to replace him. So it's like it's self-contradictory. It's just like it doesn't make sense because it's like you want to win now, but you want to plan for the future. But you want to win now, but you want to plan for the future. And it's tough because it's like quarterback is one of those positions where it's like you can only have one quarterback on the field at the time. Like you can't have both Michael Penix and Kirk Cousins. I mean, you can maybe in like very very niche scenarios, but that's not what they do.
I can almost see where they want it to work because you've seen it work in Green Bay.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Love, he sat for 4 years before he started. You look at Patrick Mahomes. He sat for a few years before he started.
1 year, but yes, Philip
He
Rivers
still
as well.
sat.
Philip Rivers
Philip
sat.
Rivers, he sat.
Aaron Rodgers
Tom Brady,
sat.
he sat.
Mm-hmm.
Tom Brady sat.
Mm-hmm.
So I can understand wanting to mold Michael Penix in time. It's just you have to find the willingness from Kirk Cousins to extend that teaching hand, or you'll get a Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers situation where it's this kid's fighting for my job. I'm not going to have any form of relationship with him. Okay, for the growth of your team.
Mm-hmm.
But also, like you said, and this is kind of a historical thing with Atlanta, they have bits and pieces on defense, but they never have a solid core defense.
Mm-hmm.
And it's time and time again where they'll have a piece here, a piece there, but they'll have a huge hole that every team knows how to exploit. And it usually moves around the field. Currently, it's in the edge rush. They have no outside linebacker help, and they really have a weak side safety.
Mm-hmm.
The minute that gets pointed out, that's where a lot of teams' one receivers go, and they get lost for a lot of yards. They could have drafted a lot better, I think, when it comes to that regard. And drafting Michael Penix was kind of spiteful, I think.
Yeah, and it's like, what's going to be the decision? Like, not even like say 4 years down the line at the end of Kirk Cousins' contract, but also 2 years down the line, or even next year, right? Because Kirk Cousins is going to be coming off his ACL injury from last year. Oh, sorry, not ACL, Achilles. Yeah.
Achilles.
So it's like you and I, we talked about this our last episode. It's like, what is he going to look like? I'm optimistic that he'll be fine. I think he'll be fine, but Michael Penix is going to be sitting. It's like, why not draft an impact player that can help you win right now
Out of the gate.
in a very winnable division too, because you have Tampa, New Orleans, and Carolina. And at least two of those other teams are going to be, at least competing for your division. The other one's Carolina. So,
Right.
But I think with their pick, it's like I can understand. Maybe it lights a fire under Kirk Cousins a little bit, where it's like, oh, like my job isn't safe, because that's what the Packers did with Jordan Love, drafting Jordan Love, and with Aaron Rodgers, they got 2 MVPs out of him, right? It's weird too, because there's also floating around on the internet is the Falcons general manager actually explaining to the owner Arthur Blank of like why he drafted Michael Penix.
He was trying to justify it?
Yeah, he's trying to justify it. And so
I have to watch that video. I haven't seen it.
I'll send it to you. It's absolutely fucking like, there's no audio to it, but it's him like really trying to sell it.
I wish there was audio.
Oh, but I wish there was too, because that was the biggest head scratcher. Other than that, in the first round, it seemed very predictable in the first round.
More or less, yeah.
Yeah, because Caleb Williams went first overall to Chicago. We expected that to go. I mean,
right.
What the debate of whether they should have drafted Caleb or not is, that's up to
That'll
debate.
Never
obviously.
Stop.
Oh no. The Washington Commanders selected Jaden Daniels, a Heisman winner. I'm like, okay. And they did a lot of sprucing up in the offseason this year. So it's like, this Washington Commanders team, they have a lot of great offensive talent. Oh, they're very talented on offense.
Mm-hmm.
but I would have liked to see them also get line help as well. But, it's neither here nor there. Sam Howell was sacked nearly 50 times last year, so it's like I hope Jaden Daniels isn't running for his life. Drake May, quarterback from North Carolina, drafted to New England. So New England gets a quarterback that's not Bailey Zappi or Mac Jones. But this is crazy too. Since Tom Brady has left New England, this is the second time that New England has drafted a quarterback in the first round. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
but this is under a new regime, though. This is not Bill Belichick's Patriots anymore. We have to keep
No.
that in mind. So this is under Gerard Mayo's guidance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, like any head coach is like when you walk into the building, unless you have like the franchise guy, the franchise quarterback, you kind of want to have your say in who you want running your team. And I think that, Drake May, I think he'll be fine in New England. Will he do anything extraordinary? No. But I think that that's a fine pick for New England. If you look at this draft in the first round, 6 quarterbacks were drafted in the first round, and they were all drafted within the top 12 picks, which is crazy.
Right.
Crazy to
So they
think.
were the first half.
Yeah,
It's craziness.
it's just quarterbacks, and it's just J.J. McCarthy to the Vikings. So the Vikings now have a quarterback that's not named Sam Darnold.
Right.
Whether he starts
Anybody else?
whether he starts week 1 or he doesn't, I know we will be seeing J.J. McCarthy on the field at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Bo Nix to the Denver Broncos. I think
That's a great pick because
Denver
they followed suit with the wide receiver out of Oregon.
Yeah, I think the Broncos definitely needed a quarterback after departing from Russell Wilson because it's like otherwise it's like who's starting? Zach Wilson. Oh yeah, that happened in between episodes. Zach Wilson's now a Bronco.
Zach Wilson is now a Bronco. That's right.
Who's the last one I'm missing? Oh yeah, Michael Penix. No, that's right.
Michael Penix.
Yep. So this was a very offensive heavy draft in total, not even just in the first round, but just in total. The first defensive player wasn't drafted until pick 15, which is crazy.
Right.
So this was a very, very offensive heavy draft.
You see, and I feel bad for the Raiders with Atlanta picking that quarterback because that was the quarterback that the Raiders needed in the worst way.
Mm-hmm.
Because now they're unfortunately locked in with Gardner Minshew,
who's fine. I mean, he's fine, right? But he's not.
He'll win you a couple games.
Yeah.
But he's not going to win you. He's not going to even put you in the conversation for the division you're in.
No.
Especially now that Denver has Bo Nix. They now have a new quarterback and they're going to move on. They're going to turn into a solid number 3 in that division. They might not get very far, but the Raiders not having a quarterback solidifies them at the bottom of the division until they do.
Yeah.
And that's the unfortunate reality there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they were definitely counting on a quarterback to fall to them in the first round. Obviously, with that, they picked up Brock Bowers, the best tight end on the board. But it's unfortunate that in recent years, tight ends don't typically, like first round tight ends don't typically do that well. Like take for instance Kyle Pitts. They have a lot of expectation, but it's tough. But you're right though. I think that the Raiders were definitely banking on a quarterback falling, but they were just getting swarmed. They were just getting picked up, and all the offensive guys, all the top 12 offensive guys, right off the board immediately.
Yeah, but what was surprising was, as offensive as it was so underwhelming in the running back department. It was sad. Only 15 running backs were drafted this year total.
I know, that's crazy.
I think the first running back was taken off the board late second, maybe third round.
Yeah.
Like, that's unbelievable to me. With how the game is changing and how running backs are becoming one of the most appreciated positions in the game. For only 15 running backs to be drafted is sheer blasphemy.
And to those watching, there's about 262 players drafted in total, like from rounds 1 to 7. And again, only 15 of those were running backs, which is again absolutely insane. But you're right though, like to think that only 15, where a lot of teams definitely needed help in that department. And some of those teams that still needed help didn't even draft running backs in the later rounds. Like, for instance,
Right.
Dallas. I strongly believe Dallas needed the best running back on the board. Obviously, we're recording this now shortly after the draft. They just signed Zeke Elliott. But let's be honest, Zeke is not 2016 Zeke. Like,
No.
they need help in the running game. I mean, unless they expect Dak to throw it 50 times a game, you need help. You need to run the ball, because you and I we've said this time and time again. You could probably pull up any episode of our podcast, and we always emphasize you have to run the ball. You have to run the ball.
Effectively.
Like,
Right, you have to run it.
If you want to be one of the elite teams in this league, is like you have to have a running game. Period.
You need to have 2 running backs, period.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 2 running back league. And I'll be honest, I was kind of hoping the Chiefs were going to draft a running back. For someone to go behind Isaiah Pacheco.
Well, they have a running back by committee. They still have Jerick McKinnon, if I'm not mistaken, and I believe they still have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire gets between 1.5 and 2 yards a carry. He's a number 3 at best. You know, he doesn't see the field. Jerick McKinnon's good in clutch situations within 3 yards. If it's anything over 5, it's Pacheco or bust.
Oh yeah.
You know, you need another runner who can get you 4.5 yards a carry, so you can be a 2-headed machine. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
You need a second run. That's why I was hoping that they would draft a running back.
There's another team that I think missed on running backs, and I think that's the Bengals.
100%.
I think. Don't get me wrong. I still think the Bengals had a very good draft. They drafted exactly the positions that they needed to in offensive tackle, D tackle, edge rushers, et cetera, except running back. Because now Joe Mixon was basically your entire running game. Now he's in Houston.
And he's gone.
And he's gone.
Right.
And so it's like, I think that they needed some young guys to really kind of electrify their running game. I'll be interested to see who's going to be running the ball for them. But I think that was a big missed opportunity for the Bengals as well.
Yeah, 100% that was a missed opportunity. You know, they have a couple of stout young running backs, you know, they have them that have yet to make names for themselves. With how revolving the door in Cincinnati seems to be right now, it seems like a better opportunity for anybody to make a name for themselves. So I feel like with every position being just about open in Cincinnati, go ahead, go have a day. You know, I feel they still drafted rather strong. I just think across the board there could have been more running backs drafted. Even if they didn't necessarily need a running back, if a team saw a good running back, there was no reason not to take him. I understand there's overwhelming needs from some teams.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're at a point in the draft where you're like, where you can look at your draft board and you're like, hole is filled, hole is filled, hole is filled. We have a pick that we need to use, and there's still 30 top running backs in the nation that haven't come off the board yet, all of which are sub 4.5 40-yard dashes. They belong in a locker room.
Or at least given the chance.
Right. They get given the chance to go to the first round of OTAs, whether they get cut or not.
Mm-hmm.
You know, let's be clear here. Just because they got drafted doesn't mean they will see the field come September.
Exactly.
There's still a lot of football that they need to do to prove themselves that they have earned a professional contract. They have to go through a bunch of training, and then they have to go through camp, and as rookies, they can be cut from camp.
Mm-hmm.
Up until I believe their rookie contracts are done, they can be cut from teams.
Yep.
So up until preseason and through preseason week 1 through 4, they are on tryouts in professionals, and to put it in layman's terms. All of their rookie is tryouts. First 3 years of tryouts.
Yep. because no spot is guaranteed. I mean, the only way that your spot is guaranteed is that the team has a belief in you. They believe that what they speculate of you, you can get to that point. Like for instance, is like obviously again, any of these rookies could be cut, right? But we know the Bears are not cutting Caleb Williams because they believe in him so much. And I'm just using him as an example, right? Um,
Right. Most of the first round will not be cut.
yeah, exactly. Unless like they some unfortunate accident happens that they will more than likely be starting. Like the first round is typically your starters. Second round too.
Right, like starter
Third
ready.
round it's like okay, you're drafting for depth. I
Right,
think
now you're gonna work for it.
one thing that I noticed in this draft was that a lot of teams doubled down on no vacancy. And what do I mean by that? We saw a lot of movement in this free agency period. We saw a lot of teams like get rid of players that were like, "Oh shit, I did not think that they were going to get rid of those guys," right? But the holes that they left, teams were like, "Okay, not only are we going to draft in that position that's vacant, but we're also going to draft another player in that same position." Just so it's like if one does not work, we have a backup. And I saw this a lot with Bills draft and the Dolphins draft as well. And I think that that was relatively smart because the Bills they cut a lot of guys this past
They had
offseason.
no choice though.
Yeah, they were strung up against the cap, but they big names: Jordan Poyer, Tre'Davious White, Matt Milano, like all these big impact players for the Bills, but they drafted exactly in those positions. We're like, okay,
Right.
we're gonna get young guys here, and we're gonna double down on those positions as well. Like they got multiple corners, if I'm not mistaken. They got multiple edge rushers. They got. I know the Dolphins. They doubled down on a lot of defensive line help. I know
Mm-hmm.
in the first round they got Chop Robinson. First off, love the name.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's not his real name, but like Chop, I love it.
Chop is
But
great. He's a
um,
great player too.
oh
He's
yeah,
really fun to watch.
and you pair him with Jamie Phillips and Bradley Chubb. That's a really good defensive line right there. but
Mm-hmm.
but doubling down on no vacancies. I think that was very Eagles, for instance. They drafted two cornerbacks. The best cornerback on the board, Mitchell, I believe his name was Quinton Mitchell from LSU. He was the first
Mm-hmm.
cornerback drafted in this year's draft. Um, and they also drafted Cooper DeJean as well.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I mean, you want to talk about a unicorn? This guy's a white cornerback. We haven't seen one of those since Jason Sehorn.
Right. Been a long time.
but
What about the
it's the
Packers?
same
They drafted
position.
3 safeties.
Exactly. I was just about to bring them up. But yes, doubling down on no vacancies. Even the Ravens did it. We drafted in the first round Nate Wiggins, but we also drafted in the fourth round TJ Tampa. So cornerbacks, which I'm glad those were the
Mm-hmm.
positions that we really needed. We needed depth there. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
I would have liked another edge rusher, but so be it. Um,
You guys drafted really strong this year.
I Ravens always have a good strong draft, and I always
Yeah.
believe in them. And believe me, I have nicknames for all the Ravens players. Even though he goes by Nate the Great, I'm going to say get jiggy with the wiggy. So,
Respectfully, I
Jesus.
feel like this was the Steelers' strongest draft in years.
The Steelers, I agree with you. I think the Steelers drafted extremely well because made a lot of moves in free agency, right? But
Mm-hmm.
you made a lot of, I guess, not sexy picks, right? You didn't get like like stellar wide receivers.
No, we front-loaded our offense.
Exactly, and I think that
We
that's the smart
front-loaded our
move.
offense with instant starters.
Hmm.
So you and I, we spoke about it, like what I would look for in the draft going in off air.
Hmm.
And I told you the first thing I wanted to look at was an offensive tackle. Specifically to be able to move Broderick Jones back to the left side of the football because that's where he belongs.
Hmm.
He must have shown true potential at the right tackle spot because we went ahead and got another true left tackle.
Hmm.
And when I tell you this kid chooses violence 100% of the time on the offensive line, It's the truth. He is one of the most aggressive offensive linemen I've ever seen come out of the draft. Fatanu, if that's how you pronounce his name correctly, his last
Futano,
name.
yeah, Troy
Yeah,
Futano. Yep.
Futanu.
hmm
Troy Futano. He is going to be such an animal. That totally fills the biggest hole that we had last year when it comes to our offensive line, which was unfortunately having to move Broderick Jones to right tackle because Okorafor couldn't get it done. He was committing too many penalties. He was letting too many people go. He was unfortunately cut come the offseason. Best of luck to him. But overall, this draft, of course, we snuck our third round diamond in the rough receiver. That'll probably be good as long as he keeps his mouth shut. um,
That's the thing. That's the thing, though. Is like some teams just draft certain positions so well, and like for the Steelers, it's like they just always find a wide receiver that's a
linebackers and
diamond.
receivers.
Linebackers and receivers, man. Like whenever they come to Pittsburgh, it's like you're made. You're made at that point.
So I'm going to put the kid on notice right now. Peyton Wilson.
Okay.
Welcome to the linebacker room. Kid's pursuit is unbelievable. You can
You got
go on
another
YouTube.
Wilson?
You can look it up. What?
I think you got two
Peyton
Wilsons
Wilson.
in this draft. Plus, you also have Russell Wilson too. You got a lot of Wilsons, man.
His name Peyton Wilson. His coach talks about it. One of his pursuit plays as a linebacker, he is 6'2". He full stride 23.4 miles an hour and hit someone in full stride. Took him down from 20 yards back.
Jesus.
The man can play safety, and he is a linebacker.
God damn, man. I mean,
so welcome to the linebacker room.
You're in good company, man. Like you're in really good company with Alex Highsmith and Cole Holcomb. You're in good company.
And Nick Herbig.
Yep. Oh man, I gotta say, like the teams that did extremely well, I think were the teams that didn't draft extremely flashy picks in the 1st round. Like for instance, I thought the Steelers drafted very well. Depth, right? No, double down on no vacancies. You got not only, I think, multiple offensive linemen.
Got 3 offensive linemen.
Exactly. You double down. It's like, hey, one of these guys, we're gonna make work. We're gonna make work, hell or high water.
Right. One of these guys is gonna start.
Like again, the Eagles, as I mentioned before, like these are the guys who, like the teams that I thought drafted extremely well: Steelers, Eagles, the 49ers, Bills, Dolphins, and the Chargers. I think the 49ers, they're one of those teams. Again, they're one of those teams that they're in win right now mode, and they drafted a lot of like the best athletes that were available to them. And I think that there's something to be said for that, where it's like they got Ricky Pearsall in the 1st round. Like he had that unbelievable catch in Miami, where it's like he was like horizontal, reaching his arm out, and then tucked in the ball. Like that was one of the best catches I've ever fucking seen in my life. And he's a 49er now, along with Debo and Brandon Ayuk, and it's just okay. But I thought they drafted extremely well. Bills and Dolphins again, double down, no vacancy. Chargers are like going to be a very different team than what we expect them to be. They're going to be a very run dominant team this year. You drafted tackle Joe Alt to partner on the opposite side of Slater, and so it's like okay, you double down on the offensive line. You got rid of your big Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, okay, but you got 3 wide receivers in the later rounds. It's like okay, like one of these guys sure to hit, and one of them is actually Jerry Rice's son. What was it, Brandon Rice? I believe, or
Brendan Rice.
Brendan Rice, yeah. It's like okay, let's see what he's got. I mean, I'm not saying he's the next Jerry Rice, but he comes from the bloodline.
So you know what that means? If they have Brendan Rice, and the Niners have Terrell Owens' son. They signed him as an undrafted free agent.
Oh yeah, I remember you telling me that. Yeah,
Tariq Owens. Tariq Owens. The Bills signed Frank Gore Jr. as an undrafted free agent. The Eagles also signed someone's son who is an all-time Eagle. I saw it today. Give me 1 second.
And I know too, the Chargers also got former Ravens running backs, J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, both of them. So it's like Chargers going to be a run dominant team.
Eagles signed Jeremiah Trotter Jr.
Oh yeah, I remember you telling me that. Yeah.
Agent as an undrafted free agent. So that's going to be cool too to see.
For those who don't know what undrafted means, it means obviously the guys that we just talked about. They were not picked in the NFL draft, but teams still signed them after the draft. So it's like, and there's plenty of players throughout NFL history that have been great and excellent players to have never even been drafted.
Wasn't Kurt Warner an undrafted free agent?
Yes, actually. Yep. Kurt Warner.
Pretty sure, yeah, he was an undrafted free agent.
Tony Romo. I know he was undrafted free agent. Those are just off the top of my head, but just because you weren't drafted to the NFL, even if you make it to the NFL, I still think that's a very good accomplishment to do.
It's like an honorable mention.
It is. So it's like just because you were undrafted doesn't mean you're unworthy of being on a team.
Right. For sure.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, man, there were a lot of teams that drafted smart players, and again, we're not saying that all these players are going to be good players or even great players, but they all deserve a chance to prove themselves in the league. And I think the teams that draft these guys are just like, look, we're willing. We want you to work for us. We want you to show yourself and prove yourself into being the player that you know you can be and we know you can be. And it's just belief in that. Now, on the opposite side, there were some teams that kind of missed this draft as well. Just from how we start, because there's a big circle of like a specific team that you and we just talked about today that missed.
So I took the time today, for those listening, I took about an hour and a half, and I went through all 32 teams. And I looked at all of their drafts, and I gave my own personal grade between A through F, like the mainstream media does. But I'm not as harsh. I don't give people Fs. An F grading is totally, I don't think about it. But I look at what they needed, and I look at how they, and how they executed that within the draft. When I looked at the Giants and the way they drafted, I almost threw the no F out the window, because it made no sense how they drafted. Their biggest issue was their offensive line. It's been that way for 10 years. 10 years off the top of my head, their offensive line has been atrocious. They drafted not one offensive lineman this year. They drafted a couple of skills players and a tight end in a sea of offensive linemen this year, because there were some great offensive linemen that went across the board.
Mm-hmm.
You should have went out and got yourself at least one starter-ready offensive line. There is a sea of offensive college talent when it comes to the line. You can draft for days offensive line and be wrong, but still be able to submit a team. At this point in time, you can barely submit an offensive team because you have no offensive help on the line.
Man, holy shit, man! And they had the top 6 pick. They were at the front of the line. They were right there.
They literally could have got the best offensive lineman on the board.
Well, actually, he was drafted the pick before him to the Chargers, Joe Alt.
Okay, so they could have got the second best one.
You take the second best one.
Fine, take the second best one.
But no, I agree with you. I think that, again, the Giants' offensive line has been atrocious for the last couple of years. And although the Giants, they needed more than just an offensive line, right? They need, obviously, wide receivers. They got Malik Nabers in the first round with their first round pick. Okay, not bad. I feel for the kid because he did not want to go to New York. You can clearly tell he did not want to go to New York.
Signs point to that, for sure.
But they needed more. And I think that it's like, you start when you build an offense, right? It's like, obviously, yeah, you want your quarterback to be throwing touchdowns to these wide receivers, but it's like, How's he going to do that when he's sacked every other play? You need to
Right.
protect him, and we've even been saying for years. It's like, look, with the Bengals, right? It's like you guys need to be drafting linemen like they're fucking candy, right? You guys just got to be getting them, and they did.
Draft and be wrong until you're right.
And they have, like, since they have gotten Joe Burrow, they have, like, not only doubled down, quadrupled down on offensive linemen. They're like, okay,
Every year they draft a lineman.
every year they draft offensive linemen, and they also get from free agency too. So it's like we are like quadrupling down on protecting
Right.
our best player. Right now, obviously with Saquon gone, it's like, who is your best player? By default, I guess it's Daniel Jones, but
He's your leader.
he's your leader, yeah. But I think for the Giants, it's like to not draft a single offensive lineman throughout this entire draft was a big miss, and I completely agree with you on that.
It was one of the worst, honestly, and that was one of the worst draft outings I think I've seen in a very long time when it comes to any team across the board. Because you visually can see the issues you have. You have a problem at quarterback, but you don't have a high enough draft pick. Well, you have the number 6. You could have went out and got a quarterback, but you already paid him, so now you're trapped into a contract. So you did that to yourselves. You lost your running back because of that contract, so now you need a running back. You are desperate for offensive line. It's the Indianapolis Colts with Andrew Luck all over again.
Except Daniel Jones is not
Except
Andrew Luck.
Daniel Jones can't play.
I will give
Daniel Jones can't play.
He can
for the
in
Giants.
spurts.
I've been saying it since he met the Giants.
Yeah.
He's not the right guy for the Giants.
I agree with you 100%.
He could be the right guy somewhere else.
He could be a good backup. He really could.
He could be a Ryan Tannehill. He could win you games if you just put him behind people who can block.
And the difference too with Tannehill is like Tannehill, when he was with the Titans, he had the offensive talent around him. The Giants
he had the offensive line.
Obviously now your entire offense now is just, you got Daniel Jones, Malik Nabers, a rookie, and Devin Singletary.
Right.
And Darren Waller. But Darren Waller was
Devin Singletary.
He was a no-show.
Right, he was a no-show due to fucking turf toe every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Like, he's not who you need. You needed to build offensive line depth and totally missed every single shot you could.
Because you know what it is, and one thing that, you and I, we talk about the draft a lot, even through like regular season as well. One thing that, I've said to you multiple times is like, one thing that I find very interesting about the draft is like the position that teams select. Bless you. One more time. Bless you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I muted myself so it didn't come through the headset.
I respect it. One thing that I find interesting is like what positions teams draft players, because to me, when you draft a player of a certain position, right, you're kind of self-admitting it's like, we could be better at this position, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, and for most of this is like you can agree with, and believe me, I think that the Giants is like, should you have gotten a wide receiver? Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Like, yeah, but not at the expense of an offensive lineman, right?
Right.
I think, for instance, it's like, okay, the Jets. Like, let's turn it over right to the Jets. Who did they draft in the first round? They drafted an offensive tackle because they want to protect Aaron Rodgers.
Right. And then you look at the rest of their draft, and then it's a build for the future draft.
Yes, and it makes sense on why they do that. It's like you draft your impact player that's ready to start week 1, that's going to protect your quarterback that you acquired last year, who got hurt the first game of the year.
67 seconds in.
Yes, it makes total sense, right?
Yes.
And you look at all like the talent in the first round too. It's like there's so many like, for instance, the Rams. They drafted a defensive lineman, a defensive end. I wonder
Jared
why. Verse. Yeah, because Aaron Donald retired, and It's like, okay, you fill in that hole, and it makes total sense to do it, right? again, the only head scratcher one was Atlanta because it's like you already signed Kirk Cousins a month prior, so it's like why do that?
That
Okay,
one was kind of done out of spite. I feel like that one was done to spite the Raiders.
it could have been right. It could have been, and God, I hope that audio comes out for that GM man. I hope it comes out,
Oh
but
my god, I hope that audio comes out.
I had to send you this. It's fucking hilarious, but but anyway, it's when you draft players of positions, like, okay, we can get better in this area. Some teams have multiple holes. That's just extremely obvious. The Giants, your your offensive line, your wide receiving core, your linebacking core, your safeties as well. You're like, now you're running back as well. Don't get me wrong, I like Devin Singletary, but
He's
can he?
aged.
He's aged now, so let's be honest, like with ourselves. Obviously, you can only draft like at a little bit at a time, right? But I don't think that they should have drafted a wide receiver at the expense of an offensive lineman. And that's just my opinion.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
Because now you're just going to have Daniel Jones another season running for his life. You know, he's going to be running for his life, throwing desperation throws, tucking underneath, and that rookie wide receiver, man, I feel bad for him because it's just going to be a lot of tuck underneath, and he's going to have nowhere to go. You know, it's going to get ugly in Giants room real quick.
Yeah, it's really going to be tough there. I know I said to you before, I was like, at the end of free agency, I was like, damn, the Giants are going to be lucky to win 4 games. Now they're going to be really
They win
lucky.
2 games.
They're going to be really lucky to win 3 games next year. And
I don't
could
want
be
to be
totally
harsh
wrong.
about that either.
I could be totally wrong because, again, a lot of with the offseason and the draft, especially, it's all speculative, right? It's all like kind of like predictions, right? But it's like,
Right.
but when you see the pattern written on the wall, where it's like year after year after year after year, the Giants' offensive line is just what's killing them year after year. The one year that they were able to protect Daniel Jones, they made it to the playoffs.
Right.
Is that a coincidence? I think
No.
not.
No, it's fucking fundamental football. It's you will get nowhere unless you have good blocking.
Exactly.
It's just what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's just what it is. And if you don't have the right formula up front, you will never get anywhere with the ball. And that goes across the board. You can have a bunch of really talented guys on the in your offensive line room. But if you don't have the proper formula of people who know how to work together, can mend together, and become an impenetrable wall that then becomes an impregnable force as it moves forward, you're gonna falter because you're gonna have a weak link somewhere. You know, in the Steelers' respect, it was Okorafor because he was always delayed coming off of the snap. He had a lot of penalties. He fell off sides a lot. You know, he had more problems, and it forced Broderick Jones, who was a stud lineman that we hit 2 years ago because we had problems on the left side, moved him to right side, and we had to fill our left tackle with a backup center who'd played left tackle in college,
Mm-hmm.
which was fine. He did what he had to do, but a secondary position is where your weak point is, and you as the team as a franchise needs to take the accountability to say, okay, that's where our weak point is, and we need to move on. So now it's more than just an offensive line issue with the Giants. It's becoming a front office issue.
Mm-hmm.
They're refusing to admit the problems that they have, that they're facing a total rebuild right now, and they're not embracing it and moving forward. They're trying to live in the playoff situation with Daniel Jones still from a couple years ago. They are not there because those offensive linemen have left. Your running back is now gone. You don't have the receiving core you had, and you don't have the defense you had. You have one person on defense who may be a stud, may not. It is Thibodeau. He is good. He is not great
Mm-hmm.
at this point in time.
You said
Will he
Brian
be good?
Burns,
Maybe.
but yeah, but
You said
yeah.
Brian Burns, but again, is he good? Yes. Will he be great? You never know. So they have to embrace the rebuild mentality and build for the future.
Yeah, I think. And what was it? I know you sent me your grade earlier, and I know we just kind of bashed the Giants for like 10 minutes, but I know in your grading that you sent me as well, there was another team that you felt that kind of missed some opportunity there, um, and I just want you to just kind of like explain.
Well, there was a
Yeah,
couple.
but there was
There was a
one
couple.
that also got another D grade for you.
The
Um,
Titans.
yes.
They didn't draft anything they needed. They were another team that was desperate for an offensive line. You know, they were another team that was living in the realm of when they were division winners. There's a lot better defensive lines than there are offensive lines for Tennessee, and they did not. If I remember correctly, they didn't draft an offensive lineman either.
They didn't. No.
So the team again, that's just my personal opinion. Is if you like you and I, we agree. If you don't have a revolving door of offensive linemen as you move forward, you're gonna fall back, and you're not gonna be able to keep up.
Mm-hmm.
It's just what it is, because the reason of this game transitioning into such a run heavy offense is because of the sheer amount of talent on the offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
The people being 300 pounds and being able to pull block cornerbacks at the second level is unheard of. So this talent in offensive line across the board is raising the bar for everybody behind them. And if you start missing the opportunities to grab these people, because these are born leaders at 19 years old at an offensive line position.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't grab one of these guys, you're going to fall behind, and you're not going to be able to keep.
Absolutely. Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And again, like you and I we said before, it's in this episode, it's a big offensive heavy draft, right? And the teams that drafted well were the teams that didn't draft sexy. They just drafted linemen. They drafted depth. They drafted exactly what they needed to, right? And I think for the Titans, and I was looking over their draft, they had I think 7 picks in total this draft. 5 of them were defensive players. 2 of them were offensive players. I personally think that, again, much like the Giants, they have a lot of needs, right? But I think your biggest need is your offense at this point in time, because we still don't know if Will Levis can play, right? Okay, we're going to give him the year, right? We're going to give him the year, see what he's capable of. We signed Tony Pollard, right? But you got Treylon Burks as your number 1 wide receiver, who you barely even throw the ball to. Like, it's who else you got behind him? I mean, Julio Jones
Right, like, who do you
was he
got?
there? I don't know, but
I don't remember.
but
But
offensive line help us too. It's like, if you really think that Will Levis is your guy going forward, and obviously
you
now
need to protect him.
You got to protect him, 100%. And again, Steelers did it right. Chargers did it right. Hell, even the Ravens in the second round, we drafted Rob Rosengarten, who was
great pickup.
Yeah, and so it's like he's an offensive tackle, and it's like our offensive line. It's like
great pulling tackle.
Even though we did lose some linemen this year, we picked some up in free agency, and then we drafted some. It's like, okay, boom, double down on no vacancy
for depth. It's for depth. There's no reason why you can't have another lineman in the room.
We also, I think, drafted another center too.
Right, you're allowed to have 62 players on your roster.
53, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, 62. 53. I could be wrong. 53. All right, so 53 men. Stack up your offensive line. Just stack up your offensive line with everybody extra. Fill up all the holes you need, so you have 2 to 3 strings of everybody, and then everybody else should be a lineman.
It's offensive line is not one of those positions that everyone thinks of for what makes a great team, right? It's like you think, obviously, the first thing, quarterback, right? Quarterback, wide receivers, running backs, and then you kind of switch over to defense at that point. But the offensive line is like, they are playing every single snap of every offensive drive there is. They're like one of the most physical men on the field. They're some of the biggest men on the field, and without them, the game would not be as played as it is. And again, it's
Right.
like it's so easy to overlook, and it's hard for offensive linemen to be in the Hall of Fame too. But like for the ones that do, their their presence matters so much. And there's a quote that I like to say. It's like when you do something right, no one will think you've done anything at all. And
That's right.
and it's so true about offensive linemen because it's like when they do everything right, no one will think that they've done anything at all.
You see, and it's funny that you mentioned when it comes to being a Hall of Fame lineman, because when it comes to becoming a Hall of Fame lineman, the stats are different than when it comes to like a skills player. It's not like touchdowns or anything like that. It's consecutive snaps.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at an all-time lineman and they have over like thousands of consecutive snaps, that means they're playing through injury, they're playing with concussions, they're playing fatigued. And this is because each game probably averages, 60 some odd snaps?
Offensively, yeah, just roughly.
Yeah, 60 offensive. So you got to think 62 times a game with about 8 to 12 seconds in between. That man is being smashed in the head at full speed all game without coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's over a 10, 11-year career. And it's one of the most underappreciated positions.
Absolutely. But the teams that have the best ones make a difference. Like for instance, Jason Kelsey's presence, right? And and the way he was able to conduct the line not only helped protect Jalen Hurts, but they also created a new way to move the ball, and that was the tush push.
Right, through him.
Without him, like people tried to replicate that last year because Philly was just doing that at a high successful rate, right? They were just doing it so well. But no other team could do it as effectively as them. Why? Because they didn't have Jason Kelsey.
Because they don't have a Jason Kelsey.
Because they didn't have Jason Kelsey. They didn't have him. And obviously Jason Kelsey, he's going to be a Hall of Famer, right? And
right.
Along
enjoy
with
retirement.
Absolutely. He should absolutely enjoy his retirement. Along with Lane Johnson, too. Lane Johnson's still there, too. And I think that when you look at the Eagles this year, we're going to see a lot less tush push because they don't have Jason Kelsey. But like that's the thing though, is his impact was felt. When people kept like you and I, we kept debating on it. It's like, oh man, this play is crazy. But it's all because of how good he was. Whether they should ban it, they should not, whatever. It was all because of who he was. Yeah, it was effective because of him, because of the center. And no one really like mentioned his name on it. They always talked about it's like him just being who he is, right? And like his podcast and everything. He's like Kelsey brother, right? But it's like he got the job done time and time again. And these offensive linemen, for all the good teams, you can name all the good teams that like. I promise you, all the teams that made it to the playoffs last year, they had a top tier offensive line to some degree. To some degree, they all had some good linemen. Absolutely. And it shouldn't be overlooked. Like, for instance, too, I'm going to take it back a couple years ago. When the Chiefs and the Bucks were in the Super Bowl together, the Chiefs lost their 2 offensive tackles due to injury.
And their center.
And for that game. And their offensive line was decimated. And
they were running a skeleton crew,
but they still had to play. They were running skeleton crew, and it was one of the ugliest Super Bowls ever because Tampa's defense was just able to run all over them, right? Mahomes, that was the first time in the Mahomes era that they did not score a touchdown.
Right.
Which was crazy to think about. But it shows the importance of what it means to protect your offense. And it's a full team sport. And those 5 guys that are up there right in front of your quarterback, they make all the difference in the world.
Well, let's be honest about it. Everybody needs to know how to block.
Yeah.
on the offense. Everyone needs to
Oh
know how
yeah.
to block, first and foremost.
Hmm.
So the offensive line are the pulse of the offense and make it move. But fuck, we're going on a tangent about blocking now. um,
I I don't give a fuck.
um, the league has started like players from blocking your man if the ball isn't coming to you.
Hmm.
And it's being listed as people taking plays off. It
Hmm.
was one of the reasons why Chase Young didn't start in the Super Bowl
Hmm.
and why
Okay.
he ultimately is now no longer a 49er because he was labeled as a guy who takes plays off. Um, so that stigma is starting to go around with some players that died, and then you'll watch their defensemen, they'll run all the way across the field and they'll be a part of the tackle. So I feel that mindset starts with the offensive line. You need to
Hmm.
bring that aggression on every single position on the field, and that starts with a big leader in the offensive room.
Hmm. Oh yeah. It what was it? I think Vince Lombardi said it from many, many, many years ago, where he's like, "Gentlemen, you're not earning your check. You're earning the check to the guy next to you. You're making sure that
Right,
he's able to feed his family." And
right. You're getting
it's
him paid.
blocking is a selfless act, and protecting and making sure that the players are next to you are able to do their job is requires a lot of selflessness that not everyone shares. And it's a trait that is dormant in all of us, but is called upon for these guys. It's called upon every Sunday. And believe me, there's plenty of times this season we're going to be talking about offensive lines. So this is just, I guess, like an
One of
appetizer
many.
of that conversation. But I guess before we get too far into tangents of blocking and stuff like that, let's get back to the draft. Let's
Go ahead.
Let me ask you one last time, Chris Palma. Do you have any final thoughts on this 2024 NFL draft?
Um, Overall, again, it wasn't necessarily it wasn't unpredictable, but it wasn't totally predictable.
Mm-hmm.
It was status quo. A lot of teams, they just drafted who they needed, and we're gonna go about into next season and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot of middle of the road drafting. Couple of players drafted great. You know, um, like you said, you rattled off a couple of winners, couple other winners. To me, the Texans, they drafted. Um, they had a really good offensive offseason, so their defensive draft was unbelievable. Um, the Jets, I think they drafted pretty strong. The only problem to me is that, again, maybe one starter is on the entire list. Um, the Bears, they drafted strong enough with the amount of picks that they had. Whether it should be Caleb Williams, but that's okay. It remains to be seen. Hats off to you guys. You guys had a Packers very strong draft. Detroit, very, very strong draft again. Um, but for the losers, it's you guys need to figure it out before OTAs start. There's still a little bit of time where you can go into.
Yeah. I gotta say, like again, the draft is for me. It's very speculative based on like how we predict these players to be, and it's hard because it's like your first overall pick may not be the stud, right? He may not be the guy. He's not going to be Peyton Manning, and Tom Brady wasn't drafted until the 199th overall pick. So it's hard to gauge how these players are going to be, but it's important to see where they go. And to the teams that, drafted all these players and the undrafted players as well, I hope you get your fair chance to make a name of yourself in this league because we love to see young guys come in and play their hearts out because that's what makes the game great. Is just like the passion played by all these players. And I look forward to seeing a lot of these guys that have been drafted in this league next year.
Very well said. I really hope that all these players do get a chance to at least prove themselves in practice to at least earn a spot on the roster.
Mm-hmm.
And then I hope even more so that if they do become someone who winds up in a rotation,
Mm-hmm.
I hope the franchise asset to build with versus just an asset for gain and then move on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is the minority. The majority will be used as capital gain, and they will be traded away. Could be something.
Hey, and there's always at least one Hall of Famer in each draft class, man. So it'd be cool to see which one
We'll
emerges
see.
from there. But we'll see. Only time will tell. So
Only time will
awesome.
tell.
With that being said, we want to thank you all for joining us on our draft recap. Next month, we do intend on having a off-season grading. So we're going to go through, and this was just on the draft, this episode right now. But next month, we plan on getting back together and talking about the total moves for all the teams and giving them a solid grade. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun. I look forward to that. Yeah, so please, if you like this video, like, comment, subscribe, and if you want to join us on any episode of Let's Talk Football, please message either myself or Chris, and we'd love to have you on the show. So, man, it's football's right around the corner, my brother. I'm excited for it. We will be here. So, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you all next month.